Hey folks, Matthew Ventures here with something really special. It's a fireside chat with Bepis, the creator of BepInEx. Now, if you're not a modder, you may not have heard of BepInEx, but it is the definitive modding platform for almost all Unity games. If you've played a mod on Escape from Tarkov, Lethal Company, Phasmophobia, the list goes on, then you probably are benefiting from some of the amazing contributions that this man has made to the open source community alongside his many other collaborators, including Jeffrey Horsington and others. So, in this conversation, we're going to be talking a little bit about all those different games and also sort of the ethical implications that come with creating a tool that is just so powerful. It's a tool that can be used for great good, but also for great evil, right? It's the modding that is sort of the first step for a lot of these hackers as well. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And remember that all proceeds from this YouTube channel are currently going to the Against Malaria Foundation. I thank you for we are now nearly halfway through our goal to $5,000, which is the equivalent cost of saving a human life. So I think so far we've raised about $2,000 between this channel and my book sales. And of course, if you want to become a game developer, then check out my book. It's linked in the description below. It's called Get Into Gamedev. All proceeds to charity, and it's basically a like a cheat sheet, like an interview prep sheet, in order to pass some of the hardest game dev interviews that are out there. So if you're interested in making games, that may be something for you. And if you're interested in modding, well, that is what this video is all about. I can't wait to get into the conversation. Join me now as we go into a fireside chat with Mr. Bepis.
Personally, for me, I started modding back in high school. So I recently got my first laptop, and I was interested in programming. I made a couple of tutorial programs I found on YouTube, but um, I didn't find that interesting. I started getting into a few games at the time, and I thought, well, I see all these cool mods around me. I want to try making stuff myself. So I started off with some really basic mods, and I started getting more and more advanced. Um, when I created BepInEx, that was pretty much my first, I guess, big mod. I got more than maybe 100, 200 downloads. Pretty much when BepInEx started, that's when my, I guess, modding career really took off.
And BepInEx is kind of a very big project now. It seems like would you say it's kind of the definitive source for modding Unity games?
Yeah, I think it's hard to gauge the true download count because it's spread out across a lot of different websites, but I think it's around 20 to 30 million downloads right now.
Wow,
Um,
that's crazy.
it's
Yeah, and I've definitely seen it pop up so much in this game I'm playing right now called Lethal Company. It's really
yeah,
popular with that game too.
yeah. Um, from what I've seen, it's a lot of the top modders in each community tend to be the same kind of modders around in every other Unity community. So one big aspect that really helped BepInEx spread around was the fact that it was really familiar with modders in other communities. And when they start jumping onto new games like Lethal Company, for example, they bring that knowledge with them. They think they want to start with BepInEx because that's what they're used to. And I think honestly, BepInEx would not be as popular as it is without them. Like that, there's no like proper credit to them in the GitHub repo because they didn't necessarily contribute code, but I think they're a very big reason as to why BepInEx is where it is today because there's that kind of community aspect. Um, I don't really know how to thank them very well for it, but whenever I join a new modding community and I see the same people there, I say thanks for spreading it around. Um, but
So
yeah, it's a
yeah,
sorry.
BepInEx is definitely something I want to go deep on. But so you were saying how your first steps into learning how to mod, you did some YouTube tutorials, and then you kind of made BepInEx, which turned out to be this huge program. So kind of what happened in the middle there? What were do you recall what YouTube videos you actually watched? Like what if you were to just like start learning how to mod, what would you even type into Google? Like how would you even start down that path?
I think so. It how you start modding is very specific to what engine and what games you're looking into. Um, in my case, for Unity, for example, I started with C sharp. So I remember the first couple of tutorials that I looked up on YouTube. It was one of them was a calculator. So I got like the absolute basic bare bones coding tutorial you could get, like past Hello World. Um, I don't remember much after that, but it was kind of of the same caliber, just stepping up a bit more in complexity. I didn't start actually modding until I guess maybe a few months after I started learning C sharp. But I've seen people who start out modding without knowing C sharp. I mean, it is possible, but it's definitely a massive help to learn the language before going into any kind of Unity modding. But
Is there okay, so if somebody wanted to use BepInEx, right? This I guess could you say it's a toolkit that you've built to mod games? How would they begin? Do you guys have tutorials or documentation on that?
yes, so on our website we have documentation about making your very first BepInEx plugin. So in this context, we call mods plugins because they plug into BepInEx. Um, we don't go into too much detail about how to actually do specific things in games because, of course, each game is going to be wildly different from the last in terms of how variables are stored or how models are loaded and textures and etc. But it's mainly to show you how to get your code running. So I guess the best way to explain what BepInEx does is that it allows you to run your own custom code in an existing Unity game. That's pretty much the main feature of what BepInEx does. There's a lot of other helper stuff it does to help you make your mods. Like it helps you with your configuration and your key bindings and etc. But a lot of BepInEx is allowing you to bootstrap yourself so you can start writing your own code. Um, there's other helper libraries that BepInEx includes, such as Harmony. I think Harmony is probably the biggest and the most used helper library that is bundled with BepInEx. Because what Harmony does is it lets you overwrite functions within the game code. It does this using lots of black magic. I probably won't go into right now, but um, it's probably the most useful tool in writing your own mods because, say, for example, you have a button in a game that spawns a ball in front of you, right? You can use Harmony to change that function. So instead of spawning a ball, it spawns 5 balls. And you can imagine that getting more and more complex and allowing you to do more and more complex mods.
So when it comes to building a BepInEx plugin for Unity, and well, let's just talk about the Unity framework, would I be writing C sharp code within
Yes.
Bepin? Okay, got it. And is there any other languages I would need to know to get started modding?
Um, it depends on what you want to do. For pure code mods, C sharp's all you really need. Um, if you want to include like new models and new textures and etc., there's a bunch of different routes you can take, but I believe the path of least resistance is to actually download the Unity editor for the specific version of Unity the game uses. Then you create your own asset bundles, which is what the engine exports as like a bundle of your textures and models. And then in your BepInEx plugin, you can actually tell Unity to load your custom asset bundle. And voila, you've got your custom models in the game. Um, I haven't really gone down that path because I only really stick to pure code mods myself, but I have seen other people do that successfully, and it's kind of amazing to see, people in leave a company like create their own monsters and stuff. Because honestly, I have no real clue how to actually go down that path. I think people have taken BepInEx and gone the extra step further than I ever possibly could have, which I think is pretty amazing.
What are some of the reasons that you think people are motivated to kind of make mods? Or what was your motivation to start out?
So it's a very open-ended question because it varies a lot between the person and even more actually on the specific game itself. Um, I think for a few games, it's some people see a game that they like and they think, oh, actually, this would be more fun if I had this feature or this new character, or whatever. Sometimes there's a game that you really, really like, and you want to kind of express your love for the game. Like it's like a form of love letter, pretty much. You write, you create new content and mods for it. Sometimes it's the opposite, Sometimes there's a feature in the game you don't like, or there's a limitation that the developer put in place, or there's some aspect of the game you don't like, and you want to make a mod to, remove that kind of restriction or aspect about it. Um, for the games I've modded, it's usually the first reason where I kind of think, oh, I think this new feature X, Y, and Z would be pretty cool in the game. I'll see if I can actually try and add it myself. Um, because there's the aspect of not really wanting to suggest it to the developer and trying to wait for it to, or see if it actually will get added at any point, as opposed to just going in yourself and adding it yourself. Um, I think for other games like Tarkov, for example, um, there's the aspect where it's a always online game, and honestly, I don't really like that kind of aspect of it. I prefer to have, my own like local single player version of it where I'm not very good at the game, so I prefer to go up against AI as opposed to other players and have to deal with all the economy and stuff. So there's this community that actually creates a really, really big mod for Tarkov where it converts it into a single player experience. Um, and I think that's actually really, really cool because that's pretty much the way I've enjoyed the game the most. Um, but
I'm a huge Tarkov fan personally, so and of course that's like such a unique Unity game because it's rare that we kind of see Unity games go so far into that first person shooter milsim genre.
yeah,
But I also know that Battlestate, the creator of Tarkov, is definitely well known for their no tolerance when it comes to mods, which in many ways they would consider hacks. Can you talk a little
yeah,
bit about kind of the tension between modders and developers, and also where the line is between a mod and a hack?
yeah. So I'm pretty sure that I'm not in the minority for thinking that it's kind of not very fun for people to load up hacks and etc. Like what's it called? Like aimbot and wall hacks and stuff. Um, I think those kinds of like cheats that give you an unfair advantage, are obviously a big no-no. But in terms of, well, let's take Tarkov for example. Um, there's a lot of speculation as to why Battlestate Games doesn't like mods. Like the public reason that they say is, oh, it enables piracy and etc., and it enables hacks to be made. Other people say that they actually want to implement their own single player version down the line. They want to charge money for it, and this is kind of cutting into their bottom line. Um, I think it kind of, if you see like a developer say that they hate mods and they want to do absolutely most of they can to remove them, it kind of like hurts a bit because sometimes like for example, if you want to make that kind of like love letter aspect of a mod and you're not able to, it kind of like makes you feel a bit sad about it. Um, if there's something you want to add or you want something you want to remove, it makes you feel frustrated. Um, I think in terms of technicalities, so I won't go into too much detail, but in Unity, the reason why we can mod it so much is because it uses C sharp, right? In the most, I guess, recent version of Unity, I guess the last five or so years, they've implemented a new technology under the hood where it actually compiles the C sharp into C++. Um, I think the main reason they did that is because C sharp can't really run on iOS platforms properly. But what other game developers see is that because it compiles it to C++, it makes modding a lot harder. Um, and while BepInEx has some, I guess, mitigations around that we can mod those kinds of games, it's significantly more difficult to the point where most modders are saying, no, it's not worth the effort of trying to mod those kinds of games. But from what I've seen personally, the kinds of games that implement that kind of that change under the hood to compile it to C++ first, even though they do see a reduction of actual like legitimate mods, the amount of hacks that appear in that game are actually about the same, because they're not using that entry point anymore. I think people who want to make hacks for the game are going to do it through any route that they can. If it's not through BepInEx, it's going to be through another path that they, I guess, whatever path that they find, right? Um, I think the biggest example that comes to mind is Phasmophobia. So there was a lot of drama back in the day where people were making mods to increase um, the lobby limit in a server and to have their own. I think it was like wall hacks as well. And the developers came out saying, "Oh, they really don't like these mods because they're actually harming the servers by allowing more people to connect because they're allowing people like hundreds of people to connect to the same server and just dragging it down." Um, so what they did instead of trying to fix that on their end is they actually tried to patch out mods entirely. They moved to that Unity backend, which is IL2CPP, which is what it's called. And well, that reduced the actual amount of that pretty much stopped any mods from being made. But from what I remember, they actually still had a lot of hacks happening, and they couldn't really stop any other way. And I'm not a big fan of using big sledgehammer solutions like that because you get a lot of innocent people in the way too. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of situations like that where I've seen firsthand where people or creators try to implement solutions like that, and they just end up harming people who try to make legitimate mods.
Well, I could definitely see their concern, I guess, because I know at least for the Unity games I'm making, the number of concurrent players is directly associated with the server networking costs. So
Yep.
if, the concurrent user count goes above a certain threshold, I would kind of be on the hook for paying that. I'm curious, like, is that when they expand the lobby size, is it still on kind of the Phasmophobia's teams? Servers, or do they make their own server for that?
It's I don't believe the Phasmophobia devs actually released the server software to be used on like private servers, for example. In that case, they were actually increasing the play capacity on the Phasmophobia dev server side, which honestly, under normal circumstances, you shouldn't be able to do that. I think there was just either some bug or some security vulnerability in the server software that they made that allowed that. But
Well, I think
yeah, it's a
Lethal,
bit.
yeah, Lethal Company, they have the same thing now, right? There's some mod where you can do a ton of people.
Yeah, I think that's a different situation because the servers on Lethal Company are actually hosted from your own machine, I'm pretty sure.
Ah, okay.
So if you increase it to 200, then that's your problem to deal with in your computer. So
I see. Yeah, what are are you taking any steps within BepInEx to kind of fight hackers, or kind of is the answer just, if they don't use this service, they'll just use another service?
I think because this is a very interesting question because I've actually dealt with something like this before. Um, Probably the least obvious location, VR chat. So VR chat used to have a lot of modders before they introduced. I think it was Easy Anti Cheat. And there was obviously with any group of mods, you're going to have a bunch of malicious ones that you know, manage to create mods that will crash other people's machines and etc. I don't know too much of the details, but it's pretty malicious stuff, right? Um, I remember so there's a competitor to BepInEx called Melon Loader, and they were the primary mod loader used in VR chat. And I remember that when the devs that made the quote unquote grey market mods got officially booted from Melon Loader, they switched over to BepInEx. Um, and obviously, I'm not pleased. I'm not too pleased to see, my tool's name being put next to hacks and stuff. Um, but from what I've personally experienced, is actually the wrong. I think it's the wrong routes to go and say, well, I don't want you people in our community because you're causing us issues. Um, what I've personally seen have the best effects, sorry, is actually going into the community and trying to reform them. Right, you try and guide them on the right path. And I was actually seeing positive results in this regard. I saw the people actually thinking, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't obfuscate mods anymore. I should make it open source and not malicious anymore. And I was glad to see these people changing because under normal circumstances where you chase them away and they start becoming more and more, I guess, vindicated. They start becoming more and more malicious. Um, Obviously, there's going to be some people that are going to be completely like unredeemable. But barring those kinds of people, I think I see the positive in everyone. You just have to kind of dig for it a bit.
I know that some people who make cheats can make a lot of money trying to sell it. Do most modders make any money, or would you say most of these folks are doing it just for fun? Kind of how does what is your like the user base population kind of look like when it comes to these different
I
things?
For those that make really, really popular mods, they'll make their own Patreon accounts and etc. And they'll actually take donations per month. And there's a couple of modders that I'm aware of that actually make it their full-time job to make these mods just from how much money they make from donations. Um, Honestly, I'm kind of a bit jealous sometimes when I see that, but at the same time, so this kind of digs into a bit about how BepInEx's history. But from the outset, I've always wanted BepInEx to be fully open source. I wanted it to be. Um, didn't want people to charge money. I didn't want to charge money for people to use it or access it or see the code for it. Um, I always thought that having it there, even if it cost me money, if I could have been earning, is much more important to kind of share that knowledge so that people can learn from it and extend it is like a lot more important than what money I could have made. Um, I guess I can go into that history if you want.
Sure.
So, oh geez, I think it's like 5 years ago now at least. Back when I first got into C# modding, there was one mod loader that we were using that was closed source. The people who made mods in that community would they actually wouldn't share the source code for the mods because they thought, well, if they kept that knowledge for themselves and they could be the only people who made the mods and they'd be the most popular in the community, right? And that kind of annoyed me a lot because I felt like they were gatekeeping that kind of mod creation aspect just so that they could have their 5 minutes of fame. And that really, really annoyed me. So I started making BepInEx version 1.0, not even 1.0, I think it's like 0.1.0. I could very, very barely load mods because I had no idea what I was doing back then. Um, and once I had enough people using it, um, more and more people started piling onto it. And as time went on and I started learning more about how C# works under the hood and how Unity works under the hood and etc. BepInEx got more and more advanced. I think I partnered. So about I think around version 4.0 of BepInEx, I partnered with Jeffrey Horsington, which you probably see on the GitHub repo. Is I think he's the got the most commits in the repo now. Um, I think he was probably the biggest, I guess, positive. I don't know what the word is. I guess without him, BepInEx would be nowhere as big as it is today, because we complemented each other in areas that we had no, well, I guess, very little idea in. Um, he was, I guess, very skilled in the more basic C++ kind of aspect of BepInEx, where it actually hooks into the Unity engine. And I was more skilled in the C# area, which to set up mods and etc. Um, and because we complemented each other on each other's skill sets, and I guess lack of skill sets, BepInEx became greater than the sum of its parts. I think, for example, the feature where you can just drag and drop BepInEx into a folder and not have to install anything, that's entirely because of him. If I didn't have that kind of collaboration with him, that kind of like easy to use drag and drop installation aspect would not be in BepInEx. It would probably not be in any other kind of Unity modeler at all. I think um, he was very, very influential in that aspect. And he was telling me that he came from a similar background where in his game that he wanted to mod, um, there was no source code available for anything that he wanted to use. Um, that was one of the, I guess, one of the reasons when I first messaged him, I said, "Do you want to collaborate? We can both benefit from this." And he said, "Yeah," he was more than happy to. Um, and then going forward, BepInEx 5, BepInEx 6, I kind of started losing interest in the project. And normally that's kind of a death sentence for projects like this, but because it was open source from the start and anyone can pretty much contribute, um, BepInEx still goes very strong now, because even if me and Horse no longer really contribute that much to it anymore, people like I guess Sixpack and Manly Marco, I think they're the top two contributors right now in the most recent times. I think if it wasn't open source, BepInEx would still be dead in the water right now. But thanks to them, it's still alive and kicking.
What do you have in terms of recommendations for people who are starting a project that's oriented in the open source direction and who are kind of struggling to find their uh, Jeffrey Horsington? Clearly, that's a one in a million kind of man. But how do you attract that sort of community to, I guess, find those collaborators?
Um, that's a very good question. I think I'm not sure if I can give good advice on this because, yeah, as you said, this was like a one in a million thing. The reason why I was able to connect with Jeffrey in the first place was because um, one of my friends in the modding community has mentioned to me one day that he was one of the guys that he had worked with previously in modding, and he actually has experience in that area. So I messaged him and asked if he wanted to collaborate, and he agreed. Um, I think, oh geez, if I wanted to recreate that today, what would I do? I think just building a network is probably the most important part. Just being friendly on the internet, making a lot of friends, seeing if you ever need help, you try to find, you ask all your friends in your network to see if there's anyone that could help you with it. Um, and obviously, if you both have something in common or a desire in common, that's a very, very big help. Um, Otherwise, I guess from the other repos or the other projects that I've worked on, those kinds of people just show up out of the blue and they start contributing and they start getting involved. And that's just mainly helped by, well, number one, being popular, which probably is going to be a difficult thing to do in the first place. But the other thing is, having an open community where, like, for example, you have, I guess, a Discord server or something where people can come in and they can start discussing, this is what they want to do with the project. Are they okay with this? And yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can give too much specific advice because I think honestly, I'd probably struggle if I wanted to try and recreate that as well.
Well, you've definitely underscored a lot how important it is, this kind of sense of community between the different modders. And, I mean, that's always something we hear from open source is just that the community is really their biggest asset. Um, can you speak a little bit towards if somebody wanted to join that community, if someone's watching this video and they're someone who wants to become a great modder, um, how could they meet those people? How could they make friends over the internet? Are there discords that you recommend or other communities where these people meet and hang out? What are some of the places you would recommend to check out?
So every game that has a modding community usually has its own Discord server for that modding community. Lethal Company has one, Risk of Rain has one, Valheim has one, etc. I think because if you want to get into modding, you probably have one game in mind that you really like and you want to start making mods for. I think the best place to start would be in that modding community for that game because number one, you'd find like-minded individuals almost instantly, and because all these communities are based off open source and etc. They'd be very open with sharing their work and their knowledge and stuff like that. Um, I think, yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I was very happy with ending up with BepInEx because before that, there really wasn't any kind of, I guess, unified communities for that for Unity games. It was all very touch and go. Maybe you'd find 10 people in one server or IRC chat or whatever, but now you have all these Discord servers with thousands or even tens of thousands of people in them. Um, I think I think trying not to force it is a big aspect as well. There's some people who come in and they say, "Oh, I want to make the world's best mod, and I want a list of hundreds of features that I want to add in this mod," and they haven't really got the kind of history behind it or the experience behind it to actually follow through with it. I think understanding your limits is a big aspect of it as well. Like with BepInEx, obviously, like even no matter if people watching this and they think, oh, it's probably the very big, very important tool. Even me as like I guess the creator of it or one of the creators for it, even I have my limits. Like there are aspects in it that I would not have been able to done had I not sat down and tried to learn, try to collaborate with people. Um, yeah, there's a lot of aspects to it
What
that
about what
one.
about from oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. You go.
Can you tell us about things from the other perspective? Because I'm a Unity developer, and a lot of folks who watch this channel are also game developers or aspiring game developers. What are some of the things that we as developers can do to sponsor and support more modders to mod our games in hopes of sort of building that community?
So there's a bunch of different things that you can do. So BepInEx specifically was made as a tool for or to give people the ability to mod games that didn't have the native capacity to allow mods. Right? You could go in and make your own mods regardless of if there's any capacity to. However, that doesn't mean that it can't coexist. There are some games like Craftopia, for example, that actually bundle BepInEx with the game itself so that people can come in and make mods straight from the start without having to install it themselves. Um, Barring that, there's a couple of patterns that you can, I guess, really help out with making mods. I think probably one of my biggest pet peeves with Unity games, for example, is when they hard bake variables and etc. into the actual editor instead of defining it in code, because that means that the variables are actually stored in the asset bundles of the game as opposed to the code. So it's very very hard to access. It's not impossible, but it's just tedious, and I don't really want to do it. Um, the other thing is um, it depends on the game, but the games that are more data driven, where they're kind of based more on just giant dictionaries of I guess I don't know how to describe it. I think for example, in a game where you have a lot of characters talking, instead of having each character baked into their own asset bundle, you have this static dictionary somewhere where you can freely add or delete or modify entries in that dictionary. And for example, that dictionary is used for figuring out what NPCs' dialogue lines are, because that makes it very easy for you to create your own changes for the dialogue, because all you have to do is just change the dictionary entry. Um, I think the other very, very big thing in Unity games is, as I was mentioning before, there's two different backends for Unity. There's the mono backend, which is probably what everyone's the most familiar with. Then there's the IL2CPP backend, which is the one that cross compiles it from C# to C++. Um, I know Unity have said in the documentation, oh, you can grant 5 to 10% increase in performance, but personally, I haven't seen that. I think honestly, all it does is makes it harder to to make mods for Unity games. Um, if you want to allow mods for your game, I highly recommend switching up to mono. I think there's a documentation page on the Unity wiki that I have to find later, but yeah, I think that's probably the biggest things that come to mind.
What about when it comes to, I know you mentioned the easy anti-cheat. As soon as you implement an anti-cheat system like that, such as Easy Anti-Cheat or some of these other name brands, is that going to basically kill your modding community because that's detected as a cheat? Or is there a way to have both cheat protection and a modding community?
So with anti-cheat, yes, I'm pretty sure that BepInEx in its current form, where you download it and drag drop it, having anti-cheat is going to kill that, because the way that BepInEx loads into Unity games is actually it uses a similar process to some malware actually, but the difference is it doesn't actually do anything malicious. It just loads code into the process, and because it uses that workflow, anti-cheat's going to see that as something that the game really needs to stop. Um, as for allowing that through the anti-cheat, I believe, look, I haven't really done this, so I can't confirm it myself, but I believe the best way to go about that is to actually bake BepInEx into your Unity game, and then the anti-cheat will see the BepInEx and the mods it loads as actually part of the game, and it won't try to try and block it. It's kind of an area that I haven't really got much experience with, because the only time I've seen anti-cheat is either with multiplayer games, where you probably don't really kind of see mods at all in the first place, or games where the developers don't want any mods at all. I haven't seen any kind of area in between, so I guess that's uncharted territory at this point.
Mm. When it comes, so for like I personally don't know too much about this, and I'm sure a lot of folks are also rather ignorant when it comes to understanding how powerful hackers can be these days, whether for good or for bad. Can you talk a little bit about what level of visibility you have into the code and the assets once they're actually delivered in an executable Unity format? Are you able, for example, to read the actual code, like the CPP files in plain, CPP English, or is it in a sort of abstracted, symbolized format where any sort of comment is going to be lost?
So for uni games, specifically for mono C sharp, so obviously this depends on the backend, but for example, in that specific example, um, it will compile it down to kind of machine code, but there are decompilers for C sharp that will turn it back into mostly readable C sharp. That's kind of one of the big aspects as to why I like C sharp and I like modding Unity, and I don't really bother with other game engines, because that aspect of C sharp makes it so much easier to mod. I don't really want to deal with the headache of trying to reverse engineer C++ because that's going to take weeks or even months, and I don't really kind of feel the desire to do that. But yeah,
So you mentioned there are different decompilers when it comes to C sharp. Was that a difficult decision to select one of them for BepInEx, or how did that process go?
so BepInEx doesn't use any decompilers itself. It just hooks into the machine code that's already compiled. Um, the decompiler that uses is up. It's highly up to the preference of the mod creator. Um, the decompiled code is not really used in the actual mod itself. It's more of a guide as to point out uh, which machine code is actually trying to do what. As opposed to trying to read the machine code manually, you can just look at the decompiled code and see, oh, this is what it's trying to do. I think a few developers have the kind of idea that they want to obfuscate that C sharp code so that you can't run it through a decompiler and you can't see the output code. Um, Honestly, I kind of recommend against doing that because number one, people are going to get around that anyway. Number two, you make it again, you make it more difficult for legitimate modders. And number three, even if people manage to extract the actual source code of the game, they're probably not going to be able to use it in any um, actual like practical aspect because that's your source code. You legally have a right to it. If anyone else is using it, you can send a legitimate takedown to them, and they can't really do anything about it. I think honestly, if I ever make my own video game, I'd probably honestly I would make it open source because I feel like I don't think there's any real threat to having your code available because there's not really anything people can do without it. There's nothing commercial people can do without it without getting express permission because that's an easy way to get sued. Um, but yeah,
Well, maybe hearing a bit more about yourself might be a good place for us to end this. One question I would love to ask you is, what's the origin behind your handle, Bepis? How did that come about?
so I've got to find the picture again. There's I remember seeing one meme where it was someone drew over a bottle of Pepsi and they renamed it the Bepsi or Bepis, and I had a picture of a gondola, which is the name of the character in my picture. Um, but I was trying to find it. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a new identity, and I just thought, well, I might as well pick that because I haven't really got any other good idea. And yeah, it's not really that eventful, but it's kind of led down to the reason why BepInEx is named what it is today because it's got my name in the as one of the syllables. I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about as well was I guess my involvement with game development
Yeah.
as a result of modding.
And
Um,
it sounds like you started modding really early. Like you were saying, kind of, I was doing how to make a calculator, and then bam, I made the biggest modding tool that the Unity community has ever seen. So I'd be fascinated to hear kind of where you've gone from there. If you're like studying in university, or if you've taken a job in game development, perhaps.
so I think straight out of high school, I managed to get I guess an internship that lasted a couple of weeks, and that turned into a proper to a job. I always thought that I needed a degree to get a software engineering job, but it was more the fact that my dad was friends with someone and he got me the job. So I had that luckily I had that ace up my sleeve. I did end up trying and go back to university and finishing that degree, but I actually ended up really hating it. The lecturer actually caught wind of the fact that I was previously employed as a software engineer, and he tried to get me to work as his kind of unpaid, uh, I guess, teaching aide. And I wasn't really kind of I didn't really have the desire to spend however much $1,000 a year to get my degree while also having to do extra work during class. act as an aide to the professor. So I ended up dropping out a couple of months in. But as for game dev, I don't think honestly, I don't think I actually probably go into a professional career as a game dev. I think I've always had the thought that making mods is kind of a hobby, and I'm only really doing it because I have fun. If I make it my career, there's the chance that I end up it becomes a source of stress, and I start hating it, and it's no longer becomes my hobby anymore. Um, so I've always heard stories of the game dev industry being pretty small and very very high in demand, people wanting to work there, and I guess that kind of breeds the environment where the because the companies have so many willing applicants that they're kind of going to be a bit more dismissive, or I guess well, not exploitative, but you know what I mean. Like they're going to be a bit more, I guess, yeah. But I've I've kind of looked into making my own video game like as a kind of thing on the side. There's I guess if you make mods for long enough, you kind of start thinking, well, I pour all these hours and effort into making content for other people's games. Maybe I want to kind of make my own game and set my own boundaries and set my own code base and have my own community. Maybe make some money off of it as well. Um, Personally, I don't think I would use Unity as my engine, even though I love C sharp and I would use C sharp as um, my code base. I've seen, as my experience modding with Unity, I've seen so many things under the hood that I wish I haven't seen it. I wish I haven't seen, right? It's like a Lovecraftian horror. The moment that you see, you really start going insane. But yeah, you start to see a lot of limitations with the engine that you can't really fix yourself, unless you pay for the enterprise level where you're shelling out thousands upon thousands of dollars to Unity just to be able to, fix something within Unity that you can't really fix yourself. Um, but yeah,
So you
there
would
is a
make
bit.
your own engine, is what you're thinking?
Yes, so I've been dabbling with FNA, which is open source version of XNA, which was Microsoft's old game engine that they used for Windows and Xbox, and it's fully C sharp. But the difference is it's not really an engine the same way Unity Unreal is. You kind of have to code a lot of aspects yourself, like how assets get loaded from disk, how textures get displayed on screen, how screen space works and what dimensions textures have and where they are placed. Um, there's a lot more effort involved in it because like it's not really given to you. Like Unity is pretty much given to you like out of the box, so you can start making games straight away. But even though there's a lot more added complexity there, I kind of appreciate the fact that it's kind of like making mods. If there's something there that you don't like or you want to add yourself, you fully 100% have the capability to go in there and add that functionality yourself. Um, I think, for example, with Unity, one of my pet peeves is the fact that the compression and asset bundles is not very good. Um, they use some old 30-year-old technology, like the same kind of thing you use in zip files, pretty much. Obviously, in the last 30 years, there's been a lot more innovation in that area, but Unity doesn't take advantage of it. So, in my current project that I'm working on, one of the things that actually implemented first was implementing a more modern compression algorithm, and
That's
I'm really
awesome
happy to see
because
that.
I know as a developer, people refer to compression as like one of the hardest problems sometimes in coding, just generally.
Yeah,
So that's really cool to
but
hear. And it makes so much sense as somebody who is a modder who really appreciates the flexibility to go in there and do your own thing, why you would choose to go the route of, this open source FNA option. So that's really wonderful to hear. Have you contributed to that open source community as part of your efforts? Will we see kind of the Bepis in these other repos as well?
so I don't think to FNA directly, but to a lot of other helper libraries around FNA, like for example UI libraries and etc. I have contributed back to that. I think there was one example I'm thinking of where there was a memory leak in one of the UI libraries I was using. And, you know, if for example, that was in some uh, base Unity library, like I guess TextMesh Pro, I think it's called. Um, if I found that, like pretty much my only route would be to, you know, file a ticket in the bug reporter and just hope that they look at it in the next 6 months, as opposed to, you know, going into this open source UI library and making the change myself, making a pull request, and seeing the fix happen in front of me right before my very eyes. Um, it's a very liberating feeling having the ability to be in control of any issues that you encounter, even if it does make things a bit more complex along the way.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much, Bepis, for taking the time to chat with us and also for your contributions, for pushing forward the open source community and modding and game dev at large in general. It's been a pleasure, man.
Great. I'm very happy for you to bring me on and have a chat with me. I'm looking forward to seeing this on YouTube.